Well, as promised, we're now on our way into the motion assignment. There are 30 some odd items to look at. I'll break them down into roughly 10 or 11 per section, so hopefully we can do this in about 3 parts. And here's part 1. Let's get underway. Well, we lead off with a nice one. This is a nice waterfall shot. I don't know where this is, but it's a very well done shot. It's using the standard landscape ploy of the what's sometimes called the cotton candy water approach. This got picked up and established as an art form by the early landscape photographers. The problem was they had no option. An outdoor exposure like this, or one in the shade, this could be a 20-minute exposure for them. Full sunlight, open thing, could be a 3 to 4 minute exposure. So getting that motion blur wasn't an option for them. It was all they could do. Well, we do have options. And this does look nice. It's very cool to do. And by the way, if you really want to pursue this, then I would recommend that if you don't already have one, you get yourself a good, dense, like ideally an 8 to 10 stop, neutral density filter. And that means you can go out in broad daylight, put that over your lens, and force you to use a long exposure for it. However, there's another option. An amazing thing happens when you shoot moving water at an extremely high shutter speed. Let's say 4,000 or 4,000ths of a second. Well, it turns the water into something that looks like frozen plastic. It's an interesting effect. One of the things you might try is when you're set up for a shot like this, of course with your camera on a tripod, is take 2 shots of it. One where the long exposure allows it to blur, like this one does, and another where a very, very short exposure captures even the individual droplets in the air. And by the way, you must remember to compensate for shortening the exposure by opening the aperture, and sometimes additionally by lowering the ISO. But here's an example of that. This I shot back at the Whitney Portal waterfall a couple of years ago. And here is a combination shot where the underlying shot is a blur, very subtle. And over that is layered in at a low opacity and selected areas the fast waterfall shot. So we get the combination of areas that are blurred. You really sense the long motion, but with the fast duration shot, you also start to catch parts of the action of that waterfall. So this is just something you could try. See if you like it. Play with it. It can be fun to do. And we'll move on to the next one. That was a very nice one. Here's a nice capture of a butterfly, either coming in for a landing or taking off from these flowers. The colors work really well. They stand out against the green background. But as is often the case, where's your shot? It's right here. Is it over here where we see the bridge and the rocks? No. We've already established the bridge in the background here. So I would suggest that you could tighten this shot up, make it a whole lot stronger, simply by getting rid of some of that. Now we've still got the bridge, we've still got all of the rest of it, but now we're really starting to concentrate on this area of the shot, which is the most important part. So this was a very good capture, but we can tighten it up just ever so slightly. Push the honing of your shot as far as you can. What I would suggest you do, there might be other things I would want to do to it. Save it at this point. Do a save as at whatever version this is. Maybe the first one was version 1. This is now version 2. Then go on and do something else. Maybe we're going to tighten it up even more. Maybe what we want to do is make it into a vertical, so we really sense this motion. Personally, I really like this one. But so now we would save this as version 3, and so on down the line. Then you can always get back to the other one if you need to. You can decide later which one you really like. Once you've decided on your final shot, then go ahead and dump the others to reclaim the space. But in the meantime, you've been able to play with all of your options and take them as far as you can. Okay? Nice shot. Let's go on. Well, here we have some kids cooling off in a fountain somewhere. We've really got a nice sense of the spray and the splatter of the fountain hitting these kids on a hot day. Boy, these last few days, I'll bet this fountain was packed full of kids. But again, where is the shot in here? It's here. It's right here. So maybe you want to get the fountain that you've been able to freeze in action very well here. That's important. But you've also got all this other stuff that's frozen. In fact, this fast shutter speed almost makes this look like ice, which would definitely cool them down. So again, maybe what we really need to do is get rid of some of this other stuff and move in here. Maybe what you could have done was to have moved kind of in a semicircle around the bottom clockwise to bring this column closer to them, more over on them, and tighten this up even better. But for what we've got, this might make for a tighter shot. Here we have another nice motion capture. Everything is in play. It took me a minute to realize what they were doing until I finally saw this frisbee in his hand. This grayscale value of the shadowed side of the frisbee and the grass is so close that I didn't even see it. So again, we've got a nice motion capture. We've got kind of a boring sidewalk here in the way, so we could solve that. Some of this is also in the way, so let's see if we can get rid of a little of that and make this work. We already know it's the fire, guys. We don't really need all of this. Let's break into it a little bit to force this action. I don't really need to be looking over at the hangars at North Island. What I want to see is these guys. Here's what I want to see. Here's where all of this is going on. Now, if we wanted to pull this in, get rid of the sidewalk, now we can do a clone stamp. I'm going to set a fairly big brush so I can pick up some larger swaths of this to blend it a little more easily. Hold down the Alt key, grab that. Now, because we have a little bit of a repeating pattern, I'm going to grab something from here, come over to break that up a little bit. And now the only thing I would do is I see I missed this top. When you zoom in, you see a lot of the things that you thought you had solved and maybe didn't. So there, I think, would be my final shot of the image. Boy, is he going to get burned. Ooh. Well, here we have the skateboarder in a nice motion blur. So we do know that he's moving. It would be nicer if he were in more of a motion position rather than just kind of standing there drifting down the street. But this does solve the issue. What I'm not sure is, what are we looking at? Are we looking through a car window? Are we seeing some kind of bizarre reflection here? This is really distracting on this shot. This part is quite nice, but we're picking up all kinds of secondary image in there. This is blurred, and yet the numbers are pretty much unblurred, pretty much frozen. The detail in the roof shingles is solid, and yet we've got a double roof here. So I'm not exactly sure what we're looking at, but it's a little bit confusing. It does give the sense of motion. It's a clever shot of that. It did solve the issue. Why this garbage can isn't blurred when the roof is, I don't know. Those kind of anomalies really start getting in the way of a shot. So before you start getting altogether too clever, really try to think about what is going to be the result. So if you're not sure, you think it might be cool, shoot it, test it, look at it, and then decide, is that okay or not? If this is a friend, you can always have him do it again until you get it the way it exactly corresponds to your vision for how this shot should be. The good news is you get to be the artist. The bad news is you're the only one who gets to be the artist and the only one that'll take the heat for the bad and the credit for the good. So think about all of those options. Another nice catch for the motion shot. This really isn't the place or the time for us to get into photo retouching, but it would serve you well here to do a little bit of retouching on this lady. I'm going to give you a very quick way to do it a little bit, and let's zoom in on what we're talking about, where we're going to talk about the motion here and the way that she's forced to grip this has created some interesting skin issues here and in the leg muscle. I'm just going to deal with the arm fast, but I deal with them both the same way. First of all, I'm going to zoom in on it to where I can see it a little better. Then I'm going to make a duplicate layer. And I'm going to work on this duplicate layer first. Now, since we don't want her to look like a plaster of Paris mannequin, we want to have some sense of skin tone. We're going to go to Filter, Noise, and down to Dust and Scratches. This was a filter put in the early days of Photoshop, and it was designed for when you were converting film to digital, literally to do dust spotting and scratch removal automatically. It was a godsend to photographers because for those of you that have had the 100 class and know the tedium of spotting a print, this made it so much easier. But it's also going to help us. So we're going to pick this, Dust and Scratches. Now, the problem is, again, the compression ratio is so great that we've only got a 3 pixel setting here. If this were a high-res shot, you are probably going to be a whole lot higher. So the first thing to do is cancel out threshold. bring the radius up to where it solves your issues. Well, there's a little too much. It'll take it a minute to settle down to find what we want. And you can use the arrow key, the down arrow here, to go through this very subtly to get it exactly where you want. Now we're going to hit the threshold. And we're going to bring the threshold up to where we just start to sense some texture. Too much. Otherwise, it's not going to look skin-like. It's just going to look blurred, which is why I'm not using the Gaussian blur to do this. So, we'll come up here and say, okay. We'll go back to our top one, hit the layer mask, and I just want a normal layer mask here. So I'm going to need a black brush, and I'm going to set this opacity down to maybe 50%. I'm going to make it, actually I'll make it about 30, because I want to be able to build this effect a little at a time, and that means I can also back out of it if I need to. So now we have the ultimate wrinkle removing cream. I'm going to go up over that sleeve a little bit. And then I'm going to hit the X key to go back to a white brush. And I'm going to paint the edge of that sleeve back in. Now I'm going to hit the X key again. Let's go back to a slightly bigger brush. Now, if you could bottle this and sell it at the makeover counter, I think you could make a lot of money. Now, you can see I blurred the edge of her shorts there. So I'm going to hit the X key to go back to the white brush. Make my brush smaller again. And go back and put that line in. So now, when we back out to see the whole thing, we've done some nice things to our lady tennis player here. Okay? So, this is a very quick review or preview of one of the ways that you can do some subtle photo retouching. Now we'll need to flatten our layer. And if we wanted to do anything else, like crop in, now we can really get the sense of this action. And you might also want to vignette it just slightly. I'm going to use the burn tool because I just want to bring it down a little. Accurate color isn't that important right here. And now we can enhance this a bit. Okay? Well, that's simple. Oh, I'd probably want to bring her shoes in a little bit if I can. At least put some sense of detail in there. That would have been a job for the highlight filter in Camera Raw when this was still a raw image. All right, let's move on. Well, this is a nice catch of the birds in flight. What's really interesting is, although I think this is an aerial shot, or looking up into the air, it almost reads like a reflection because of the repetition of the bird shapes. So I think you've done a really nice job here. Again, I'd get rid of a little of the sky. You don't need all this. And besides, forcing this into slightly more of a panorama accentuates that horizontal line a little better. This you may or may not decide to keep. If we got rid of it, we could do that. Or the truth is, we could simply compose it based on that tree to get all the tree in. And now with our clone stamp, we could come holding down the Alt key, pick it up, and get rid of it. And now we've got a more contained image here. This is a nice catch. Very nice pattern. Good use of the motion freezing with the faster shutter speed. Nice job. Oh, we have the dog out playing in the surf this time of year with the heat that we've been having. The poor creatures are probably loving it. By the way, when you're on dark asphalt and it's hot like this, it's just brutally hot, think about how it would feel if you were walking on it with your bare feet. And then think about your dogs walking on it with their bare feet. Yeah, they have calluses built up that we don't have, but it's still highly uncomfortable. And I've had a number of vets tell me that a lot of dogs come in with burned feet from walking on this super hot stuff. So just be aware of that. This is a nice shot of the dog running, a good capture. The shutter speed is great. The capture is a little wide. I'll bet you never would have guessed that I was going to say that, huh? So now we're really accentuating the dog and the action that's going on, so we can see it quite well. It's a nice capture. And sometimes when you're out doing stuff like this, you simply can't get close enough, or you don't have time to work the zoom lens or change lenses to zoom in the way you would like to, because the dog's running, there it is, poof, you got to shoot. And I believe, especially in the digital world, you just shoot it and hope for the best, and hope that later you're going to be able to make some corrections to it. In this case, that correction's simple. So this is again a very nice capture in terms of motion capture. Well, this is an interesting capture of this event going on in front of the old building. I'm not sure if this is a cathedral or not, but it may be a church at least. It's a long shutter speed. We've got a lot of blur. There may be a little too much. On the other hand, this does start to look very much like an impressionistic painting. So that's cool. I think it really kind of works and captures the sense of it. Again, where's your shot? It's here. It's in this area. With the color, with the dancers, with the people watching. We don't need all of this. For me, we certainly don't need this. And for those of you that think that, well, I'll put that in and that way nobody can get rid of it. Let me show you something. Yeah, this would have been a little nicer with a camera on a tripod. I'm just going to deal with this for right now just to make a point. It is really that easy, my friend. If you're making a poster, and you have the personal reputation to be able to pull off that kind of addition, then very cool. Go ahead and, for Pete's sake, do it. But if you don't, you may have simply limited your sales ability. We can clean this up a little better, but I think you can get the gist of how simple it is to deal with that if you really wanted to. I like the square in this. You're kind of in a town square. The shot is square. I think that's very good. I'm one of those weird old commercial photographers that liked the square that you got out of the 2 1/4 film. And especially, I did a number of record covers, and that was a perfect format. It's not used much anymore, and I think that's too bad. You used it well here, but we could put something down in here other than your signature. But now we're concentrating more on this anyway. This is interesting. I think it would have been good to experiment a little more with that. See what other options you could pull out with different settings, maybe with a planted camera. Maybe if you really wanted to do this, and you had someone in here that was moving around, then set your camera for a long shutter exposure and follow them so that they're moving, the background is moving relative to you, everything is moving, and you really can start to get a very impressionistic type image. Okay, let's look at the next one. Ah, well, this must be part of the same ceremony, or at least something going on about the same time. We have what appear to be Aztec characters painted up. The look on this guy's face looks like he's just about to have the big obsidian dagger ripping his heart out, but it's unfortunate that this character with the jaguar mask is blocking him. That's really a miscalculation in timing. It'd be nice to see this guy in full. What would be nice is if you actually were out a little further and caught that, or that you decided to really concentrate on maybe this guy. This is really a cool shot in here. And the shot I don't think would stand this enlargement, but if it did, or if you had caught this, and if we had, something back to about there, then this could have made a very nice shot. And this could make a nice shot. With this guy. So this is one of those, again, where you've got multiple shots in the same shot. One of the things that really doesn't work is this, because this is being blocked. What's he doing? Is he in agony? Is he making some supplication? Is he in the middle of a great dance move? We don't really know what's happening. So that's a little unclear. And normally this little bit of tilt would add some to the tension of it, this dynamic tension. But if you're going to do that, then you need to make it look not like you just were standing crooked, but like you really intended it, so that there might even be a greater tilt to it. When it's done correctly, it's referred to as a Dutch tilt, and it comes from the German cinema of the 20s, 30s, 40s, where they used this a lot to create a sense of dynamic tension. There's some really nice elements in here. I'm not sure what all this is about, but the first thing we'll do is get rid of it, just so we can see the image itself without those distracting border lines. Okay, so now what do we have? Well, we've got some fountains and some construction, and the purpose of this, according to the title, was to show some blur. Cool, it does show some blur. Here's some blur in the fountain water. Ooh boy. Now, what is this picture about, really? Other than the fact that it exists solely to show some motion blur. Is it about the fountains? Well, maybe, maybe not. Is it about the building that occupy a large part of it? Yeah, probably not. Is it about the sky? That occupies a lot of it. But I'm assuming that's not the point. So it does capture the motion blur. You certainly got credit for that. But beyond that, it doesn't really tell us all that much about much of anything in the shot. And what is fascinating is the question of, what is this interesting blue towel or whatever laid there in the middle of the shot? What does that tell us in terms of a story? Maybe a lot. Okay, so we're done with part 1, and we'll get this posted and get it up on the YouTube for you. Like I say, I think this is going to take 3 parts to pull this off, but we're getting there. We're getting there, finally getting caught up. See you in the next part.